The vast domed chamber of the Galactic Council Hall aboard the Council Station hung in silence, save for the persistent hum of the station's engines and the soft click of Ambassador Jake Morrison's shoes as he approached the central podium. The polished obsidian floor reflected the cold blue lights above, casting his shadow in multiple directions as 12 alien representatives watched from their elevated seats. Jake straightened his formal diplomatic uniform, adorned with Earth's emblem, a simplified globe encircled by olive branches. 200 years had passed since humanity's first interstellar contact, and for most of that time, Earth had been working to earn a place among the stars. The 12 dominant species that controlled the political and economic framework of explored space had kept humanity at arm's length, allowing limited trade and cultural exchange, but never truly accepting them as equals. The emergency session had been called the previous night, and Jake still didn't know why. His requests for information had been met with silence, and even his most reliable contacts among the council staff had avoided him. The atmosphere felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that made the fine hairs on the back of his neck rise. Ambassador Morrison, intoned Counselor Vexithara, the reptilian representative of the Krillian Imperium. His scaled face remained impassive, but the slight flare of his neck frills betrayed agitation. The Council appreciates your prompt response to our summons. Jake nodded respectfully. The Earth United Nations values its relationship with the Galactic Council. I'm here to address whatever concerns have arisen. The chamber's central holographic projector flickered to life, displaying three-dimensional images of sleek warships, unmistakably human in design but unlike any vessels Jake had ever seen. Their hulls gleamed with weapon systems far more advanced than anything Earth had publicly developed. These images were captured near the Zephyr Prime colony 3 standard days ago, continued Vexithara, his voice deepening. Would you care to explain why Earth has been secretly constructing a war fleet for the past decade while claiming to seek peaceful integration? Jake stared at the images in genuine confusion. Counselor, I've never seen these designs before. There must be some mistake. We have confirmed their human origin beyond any doubt, interrupted Morak, the crystalline entity representing the Botanical Alliance. The energy signatures match human technology, merely more advanced than what you've shared with us. Jake's mind raced. Please, allow me to contact President Carter. There must be an explanation. The time for explanations has passed. Vex of the Quarian Collective cut in, its voice modulator emitting tones of finality. For 2 centuries, we have watched humanity ascend from a primitive planetary species to a spacefaring power. We invited you into our community despite historical precedent suggesting caution. And in return, Vexithara continued, you have prepared for war while speaking of peace. Jake's hands gripped the podium. I swear to you, as Earth's representative, these accusations are unfounded. We have honored every treaty. The Council will now vote, announced the moderator, a being of pure energy contained within an elaborate mechanical shell. The charge is deception with intent to wage war against Council members. The accused is Earth, represented by Ambassador Jake Morrison. I demand the right to defend my species, Jake's voice echoed through the chamber. Under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter, Earth is entitled to present evidence in its defense. Your request for delay is denied due to imminent threat assessment, replied the moderator. The vote will proceed. Jake watched in horror as each council member registered their vote. The holographic display showed a unanimous decision. The council finds Earth guilty of preparing acts of war against peaceful civilizations. The moderator announced, the sentence is immediate containment and sanctioning of all human vessels and colonies. And what of Earth's representative? Asked Vexithara, his eyes fixed on Jake. Example must be made, hissed Vex. The humans must understand the gravity of their transgression. The moderator paused, its mechanical shell rotating slightly. Ambassador Jake Morrison of Earth, you are hereby sentenced to immediate execution as a representative of a hostile power. Your death will serve as notice to your species that deception and aggression will not be tolerated in our galactic community. Jake's blood turned to ice. This is madness. You can't possibly. 4 security drones descended from the ceiling, surrounding him with glowing containment fields. "I am a diplomatic representative," Jake shouted, struggling against the invisible force holding him in place. "This violates every principle of interstellar law." "Laws apply to those who honor them," Vexithara replied coldly. "Your species has forfeited such protection through duplicity." As the drones began to tighten their deadly field around him, Jake's final thoughts were not of himself, but of Earth. "You're making a terrible mistake," he gasped. "Please, reconsider." The containment field collapsed inward, and Ambassador Jake Morrison's body crumpled to the floor. The entire execution had been broadcast across the galaxy as a warning. On Earth, President Eliza Carter sat in stunned silence as the transmission ended. Around the long table of the Planetary Defense Chamber, the Joint Interstellar Command Staff remained motionless, their faces masks of controlled rage and grief. "They've killed Jake," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Without trial, without evidence, without even allowing him to speak to us." General Frank Hayes, her chief military advisor, leaned forward. "Madam President, this was a premeditated act. The emergency session, the fabricated evidence, the immediate execution, they planned this." Carter nodded slowly, then pressed a button on the console before her. "Computer, verify identity. Carter, Eliza J., President of Earth United Nations. Authorization code, Prometheus Ascending." "Identity confirmed," responded the system. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Authorization, Carter Alpha 7 Lazarus." A moment of silence hung in the air before the computer responded. "Protocol Omega initiated. Project Lazarus now active. Please confirm final authorization." President Carter looked around the table at each of her advisors. Some nodded firmly, others looked down at their hands. None objected. "I confirm final authorization," she said clearly. "May God forgive us for what we're about to do." Across Earth and throughout the solar system, buried facilities sprang to life. In a hardened bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, Dr. Amanda Price received the activation code and immediately began the awakening sequence for her division of Project Lazarus. Similar scenes played out in facilities hidden beneath the Sahara Desert, on Mars, and on Earth's moon. Satellites disguised as routine observation equipment shed their innocuous coverings to reveal weapons of devastating power. Ships that had appeared to be simple transport vessels transformed, their hidden compartments opening to deploy advanced weapon systems. On Zephyr Prime, the colony world where the supposed human warships had been detected, Dr. Kevin Walsh received an encrypted message. He closed his eyes briefly, then turned to his assistant. "It's time. Wake the sleepers." Throughout the galaxy, human agents who had been living as ordinary colonists, traders, and workers received their activation codes. They moved silently to predetermined positions, awaiting the signal to strike. In the asteroid belt of Earth's solar system, Captain Ben Rogers stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, a warship that had never officially existed. Around his vessel, 40 other ships of the Hidden Fleet began powering up their systems. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," his first officer announced. Rogers nodded grimly. "Commence synchronization with Global Command. Prepare for dimensional jump on my mark." Back on Earth, President Carter addressed the emergency session of the United Nations. "Today, we witnessed the execution of Ambassador Jake Morrison, a man of peace, a believer in cooperation between species, a diplomat who dedicated his life to building bridges between Earth and the galactic community." She began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "His reward for this dedication was death without trial, without evidence, without mercy." She paused, looking at the stunned faces of the assembled representatives. 200 years ago, humanity discovered we were not alone in the universe. We reached out with hope and curiosity, seeking to join a greater community of intelligent life. We endured restrictions, accepted second-class status, and abided by rules designed to keep us contained. We believed, as Jake believed, that patience and goodwill would eventually earn us acceptance. Her expression hardened. "Today, The Galactic Council has shown us the truth of our position. We were never meant to be equals. We were to be controlled until they decided we had become too troublesome, and then eliminated. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The execution of Ambassador Morrison was not justice. It was a declaration of war against humanity. And we will respond accordingly. As President Carter spoke, Jake Morrison's execution continued to play on screens across human territories, in bars and homes, on transport ships and colonies. Humans watched their representative die and felt something fundamental shift within their collective consciousness. Jake had believed in peace until his final moment. He had trusted in diplomacy and cooperation, had staked his life on the idea that species could rise above their differences. Now, as his lifeless body was unceremoniously removed from the council chamber, his faith in interspecies harmony died with him. On the Vengeance, Captain Rogers received the final command. All ships, execute dimensional jump now. Operation Retribution is active. The fleet vanished from the asteroid belt, reappearing simultaneously at strategic points throughout Council space. On Zephyr Prime, Dr. Walsh activated the network of sleeper agents. Across the planet, humans who had lived among aliens for years revealed their true purpose, disabling planetary defenses and communication arrays in coordinated strikes. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. The Council, which had expected Earth to respond with diplomatic protests or at most limited military action, found itself under simultaneous attack across hundreds of light years. Dr. Amanda Price stood in the central control room of the Colorado facility, surrounded by screens showing the progress of the attacks. Kinetic strikes on primary targets in 3, 2, 1. From orbit, massive tungsten rods accelerated toward the surface of Zephyr Prime, Krillian, and the homeworld of the Botanical Alliance. These simple weapons, metal rods dropped from orbit, required no advanced technology but carried the destructive force of nuclear weapons without radiation. The impact sites included the central government districts, military command centers, and spaceports. Admiral Susan Clark watched from her command ship as the first strikes hit. The planet below erupted in fire as the rods struck with the force of small asteroids. She felt no satisfaction, only a hollow sense that this had always been inevitable. "Second wave ready, Admiral," reported her tactical officer. "Proceed," she ordered quietly. In deep space, the Eternal Glory, flagship of the Krillian fleet, encountered the Vengeance before the alien vessel could even raise its shields. The human warship fired weapons that the Council had never seen, weapons that Earth had been developing in secret for decades, preparing for the day when pretense would no longer be necessary. The Eternal Glory, pride of the Krillian Imperium and considered invincible in conventional warfare, was destroyed in less than 10 seconds. Throughout Council space, the pattern repeated. Human ships appeared without warning, struck with overwhelming force, and disappeared before effective resistance could be mounted. Human agents on the ground ensured that communications remained disrupted, preventing a coordinated response. 3 days after Jake Morrison's execution, President Carter addressed a broader audience, representatives of the 43 non-council species that had existed under the dominance of the 12 major powers. "We did not choose this war," she told them, her face haggard from sleepless nights, but her resolve undiminished. "It was forced upon us when the Council revealed its true intentions toward Earth. But we have long prepared for this possibility, knowing that a system built on domination rather than cooperation would eventually turn against us." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I speak now to all species who have lived under Council rule. Earth offers you a choice: stand with the Council and share their fate, or declare neutrality and be spared. We seek neither dominion nor conquest, only security for our species and an end to the Council's tyranny." It was a lie. Of course, Earth had already decided the fate of the Council species, but for the others, the illusion of choice would make the transition smoother. By the end of the first week, 3 Council homeworlds had been rendered uninhabitable. Their colonies, cut off from support and facing the prospect of similar destruction, began to surrender. Jake Morrison had become a symbol, Not of peace as he had hoped, but of humanity's awakening to the harsh realities of interstellar politics. His face appeared on the uniforms of Earth's soldiers, a reminder of why they fought. His final words, "You're making a terrible mistake," became a battle cry. 2 years after the execution that sparked the war, all 12 council species had been effectively eliminated as political entities. Their military forces were destroyed, their governments dismantled, their remaining populations placed under human administration. The 43 non-council species had, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, accepted Earth's terms. Resistance movements emerged periodically, but they were crushed with methodical efficiency. Earth's intelligence network, built over decades of perceived subservience, identified threats before they could materialize into organized opposition. The former council station was renamed Morrison Station and became the center of Earth's interstellar government. Human colonies expanded to over 300 worlds previously controlled by council species. Earth's sphere of influence now extended throughout what had once been council space. Dr. Helen Brooks, who had developed the biological weapons held in reserve during the conflict, continued her work, creating more targeted pathogens that could eliminate specific alien physiologies if needed. These weapons remained unused but served as the ultimate guarantee of human dominance. President Carter, in the final year of her term, stood before the monument to Ambassador Jake Morrison that had been erected in what was once the council chamber. The bronze statue depicted him at the moment of his execution, dignified even in the face of injustice. His death awakened humanity. Read the inscription at the base. Carter stared up at the face of the man whose murder had unleashed Earth's carefully prepared vengeance. She wondered what Jake would think of what they had done in his name. The species extinguished, the civilizations toppled, the Iron Peace now imposed across former council space. "We had no choice," she whispered to the statue. "They would have done the same to us, eventually. You were just the beginning." But as she turned to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake Morrison, the real Jake, not the martyr they had created, would have found another way. In the decades that followed, humanity expanded further into the galaxy. New species were discovered, studied, and carefully monitored for signs of potential threat. None were allowed to develop to the point where they might challenge Earth's position. The galaxy entered an era of peace, a peace maintained by the absolute military dominance of humanity and the knowledge that resistance meant extinction. It was not the peace Jake Morrison had envisioned, but it was peace nonetheless. And in the most classified sections of Earth's archives, the truth remained hidden. The warships that had allegedly been discovered near Zephyr Prime, which had served as the pretext for Jake's execution, had indeed been human vessels. They had been deliberately revealed to provoke exactly the response the Council had given, providing Earth with the justification it needed to unleash Project Lazarus and claim its place as the dominant species of the galaxy. Jake Morrison had died believing in peace. The irony that his death had been the spark for Earth's carefully orchestrated ascension would never be known to him or to the billions who revered his memory. On the bridge of the flagship Retribution, Admiral Susan Clark looked out at the stars that now belonged to humanity. "Was it worth it?" asked her executive officer quietly. Clark considered the question. "Ask me again in 1,000 years," she replied. "If humanity still exists, then perhaps it was." The officer nodded and returned to his duties, leaving Clark alone with her thoughts. She had personally overseen the destruction of 3 inhabited worlds, ended civilizations older than human recorded history, and helped establish Earth's unquestioned dominance over known space. And yet, in quiet moments like this, she sometimes heard the echo of Jake Morrison's final plea. "You're making a terrible mistake." Perhaps they had, but it was too late now for such doubts. The die had been cast the moment Jake's body hit the council chamber floor. Humanity had made its choice, not peace through cooperation, but peace through overwhelming power. Peace through fear. Peace through the certainty that any challenge to human authority would meet with swift and total elimination. It wasn't the future Jake had worked for, but it was the future his death had created. In her private quarters on Morrison Station, Dr. Amanda Price reviewed the latest reports from the outer colonies. New life forms had been discovered on a planet near the former Quarian territory. Primitive, but showing signs of rapid cognitive development. The assessment team recommended establishing an observation post to monitor their progress. Price signed the authorization, adding a note: intervention protocols to be prepared if development exceeds acceptable parameters. She then turned to a small hologram on her desk. Jake Morrison, smiling at some diplomatic function years before his death. They had been friends once, sharing dreams of a galaxy where species learned from one another, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. "I'm sorry, Jake," she whispered to the image, "but this is who we really are." On Earth, in the planetary defense chamber where Protocol Omega had been initiated years before, a new president received a disturbing report. Sensors had detected unusual energy signatures from beyond the former Council space, possibly indicating a civilization with technology comparable to Earth's. "Your recommendations," she asked the assembled military and scientific advisors. General Hayes, now white-haired but still serving as chief military advisor, responded without hesitation. "Immediate containment and assessment. Madam President, if the threat is confirmed, preemptive action under Protocol Omega." The president nodded gravely. "Proceed." And so, the cycle continued. The peace that Jake Morrison had died for remained elusive, replaced by a different kind of peace. One maintained not through understanding and cooperation, but through vigilance, power, and the willingness to eliminate any potential threat before it could manifest. In a small memorial garden on Morrison Station, a plaque bore Jake's most famous words: "The greatest strength of humanity is not our technology or our adaptability, but our capacity for empathy, our ability to recognize ourselves in others, no matter how alien their form or thought." Few visitors paused to read it anymore. Those who did often wondered how such idealistic words could have come from the man whose death had launched humanity's rise to galactic dominance. None suspected that the real Jake Morrison would have been horrified by what had been done in his name. None questioned the narrative that had transformed a man of peace into the catalyst for war. And none dared to suggest that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity had sacrificed something more valuable than the lives of their enemies when they had chosen domination over coexistence. The stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the species that rose and fell beneath their light. And in the vast silence between them, the echo of a single question lingered. Was it worth it? Only time would tell. And time, as humanity had learned, was now firmly on their side. Captain James Reeves stood on the observation deck of the exploration vessel Discovery, gazing at the uncharted system that lay before them. His ship had been dispatched to investigate rumors of a previously unknown species developing faster-than-light capabilities, a threshold that automatically triggered Earth's containment protocols. "Initial scans complete, Captain," reported his science officer. "We've detected artificial structures on the fourth planet and significant space activity around the sixth. Preliminary analysis suggests they've achieved interplanetary travel, but not yet FTL." Reeves nodded. "Maintain stealth protocols. I want detailed scans of their technology, social structures, and military capabilities." "And if they meet the threat criteria, sir?" The captain turned, his expression unreadable. "Then we follow Protocol Omega, as always." He returned his gaze to the distant planets, their newly discovered inhabitants unaware that they were being assessed for potential elimination. This was humanity's role now, eternal vigilance, the guardians of a peace maintained through the constant threat of overwhelming force. "For Jake Morrison," Reeves murmured, touching the emblem on his uniform that bore the martyred ambassador's face. "And for Earth." Dr. Amanda Price sat in her office, reviewing the latest containment operation. A potential uprising on one of the former Krillian worlds had been neutralized before it could spread. Efficiency reports indicated minimal collateral damage and complete success in eliminating the leadership structure. She approved the final assessment and closed the file, then opened a new message from Earth Command. Another mission was being planned, another potential threat to be evaluated and, if necessary, removed. This was the legacy of Project Lazarus, Not the resurrection of hope that its biblical name might have suggested, but the rebirth of humanity as the undisputed power in known space. The price had been high, measured in extinct civilizations and abandoned principles, but Price had long ago accepted it as necessary. Still, in the quiet moments between operations, she sometimes wondered what Jake would think of what they had become. The Jake she had known, not the symbol they had created. The man who had believed so fervently in the possibility of genuine cooperation between different forms of intelligent life. We had no choice, she told herself, as she had countless times before. They would have destroyed us eventually. But the doubt remained, a quiet whisper beneath the certainty. Had there been another path? Would Jake have found it if he'd been given the chance? These questions had no answers now. History had made its choice when the Council had executed Earth's ambassador, and humanity had responded with a fury that had rewritten the political landscape of the galaxy. Peace through power, security through dominance, survival through preemptive action. These were the principles that now guided human civilization as it expanded through the stars. Not the noble ideals Jake Morrison had championed, but practical, effective methods that ensured humanity would never again be vulnerable to alien judgment or threat. And if something essential had been lost along the way, some fundamental aspect of what had made humanity worth preserving in the first place, that was a price most were willing to pay. Most, but not all. On a remote colony world, far from the centers of human power, a small community had established itself with a different vision. Here, survivors from several of the former Council species lived alongside humans who had rejected Earth's militaristic path. They called their settlement New Beginning. And they lived by Jake Morrison's actual principles: cooperation, mutual respect, and the celebration of diversity. Earth knew of their existence but considered them too small and isolated to pose a threat. A curious experiment allowed to continue under distant observation. And it was here, ironically, that Jake Morrison's true legacy lived on. Not in the massive fleets that patrolled human space, not in the protocols that eliminated potential threats, but in this small community where different species had found a way to live together in genuine peace. Perhaps someday this model would spread, challenging the dominant paradigm of control and fear. Perhaps humanity would rediscover what Jake had known all along: that true security comes not from domination, but from connection, not from power, but from understanding. But for now, the galaxy remained under the watchful eye of Earth's military might. The peace Jake Morrison had died for remained an unfulfilled dream. And the question hung in the void between stars, unanswered. Was it worth it? Only time would tell. And time, as humanity had learned, was a luxury afforded only to those with the power to secure it. On Morrison Station, in what had once been the Galactic Council chamber, President Carter's successor stood before assembled representatives of Earth's colonial governments. Behind him, the statue of Jake Morrison loomed large, his expression forever frozen in that final moment of desperate appeal. 2 decades have passed since Ambassador Morrison's sacrifice awakened humanity to the harsh realities of interstellar politics. The president began, 2 decades in which we have transformed from a species on the defensive to the undisputed power in known space. Applause rippled through the chamber. Our security is absolute, our position, unassailable. Where once we faced extinction at the hands of the Council, now no force exists that can threaten Earth or her colonies. More applause, though some representatives remained notably quiet. This is the peace we have built, a peace secured not through weakness or compromise, but through strength and resolve. A peace that honors Jake Morrison's memory by ensuring that no human will ever again be executed at the whim of alien powers. The president paused, looking up at the statue. His death awakened humanity. He quoted from the inscription, "And in our awakening, we have reshaped the galaxy." What he did not say, what had become an open secret among Earth's leadership, was that the entire scenario had been planned. The warships near Zephyr Prime, the Council's discovery of them, Jake Morrison's execution, all had been anticipated, even facilitated, by elements within Earth's government who had decided that coexistence with the Council was neither possible nor desirable in the long term. Jake Morrison had been chosen as Earth's ambassador precisely because of his genuine belief in peace and cooperation. His sincere shock at the Council's accusations, his desperate final plea, these could not have been faked. His death had provided the perfect catalyst for implementing Protocol Omega, uniting humanity behind a righteous war that had been planned for decades. The true architects of Project Lazarus had gambled with one man's life and won control of the galaxy. They had sacrificed Jake Morrison, unknowing, unwilling, on the altar of human supremacy. And as the president concluded his speech to thunderous applause, the ghost of that sacrifice lingered in the chamber, unacknowledged but ever present. The price of the peace that now reigned among the stars. A peace built on deception. A peace maintained through fear. A peace that Jake Morrison, had he known the truth, would have rejected with every fiber of his being. But Jake was dead, transformed from a man into a symbol, his actual beliefs long forgotten in favor of the narrative that had been constructed around his martyrdom. And the galaxy continued under human dominion. Peaceful but never truly at peace. Secure but never free from the shadow of Protocol Omega. Was it worth it? The question echoed through time, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. For in choosing security over principle, humanity had secured its future but compromised its soul. And no one, not even the architects of humanity's galactic dominance, could say with certainty whether that bargain would ultimately prove wise or disastrous. Only time would tell. And time, as humanity had learned, was now humanity's to control, for better or for worse.